Austin Powers, International Man of Mystery wasn't just a spy spoof, it was a velvet-covered time machine, a psychedelic swing through 60s cool, where martinis were shaken over the villain's head and Bond got stripped down to his frilly shirt. But behind the crushed velvet and cheeky winks, it nearly lost its mojo before the first take. Jim Carrey almost took Dr. Evil's pinky. Nearly half the movie was unleashed in wild improv. And one real-world crime? It was darker than anything the script dared to touch. These are 20 weird facts about Austin Powers. And buried in all that mojo and madness, a license plate that told you everything. Before Austin said a single word. Some missions start with gadgets. This one started with a grin. Number 1. Before Austin Powers ever sipped a martini or dropped a "yeah, baby," he was just a man in a velvet suit fronting a fake band. In the early 90s, Mike Myers joined forces with Matthew Sweet and Susanna Hoffs from the Bangles to form Ming T, a 1960s-inspired parody group. On stage, Myers wasn't Mike Myers. He was already Austin Powers. The wig, the teeth, the swingin' moves. They played psychedelic pop, cracked cheeky jokes between songs, and leaned so hard into the British invasion vibe, it felt like the Beatles had crashed a bachelor party. Show by show, the character evolved. Sharper suits, bigger swagger, dirtier jokes. And Myers' then-wife, Robin Rouzan, saw what was happening. She told him flat out, "This guy belongs on the big screen." That push flipped the switch. What started as a one-off stage gag in a parody band became the seed of an international spy farce, one that would dance its way into movie history. Number 2. It was late, the kind of late where the highway feels like it belongs to you alone. Mike Myers was behind the wheel, the city lights thinning in his rear view, when the radio cracked out a slow, sultry groove, The Look of Love by Burt Bacharach. The horns, the strings, the lazy swagger. It wasn't just music, it was a time machine. Suddenly, Myers was back in the world his father had introduced him to. The world of velvet blazers, swinging London clubs, and over-the-top spies with absurd gadgets. And in that moment, he saw him. The teeth, the glasses, the crushed velvet, the ridiculous confidence of a man who could save the world and still stop for a cheeky dance. By the time the song faded out, the basics of Austin Powers were already alive in Myers' head. The voice, the look, even the strange blend of parody and love letter to an era that didn't care about being cool. Because it was cool. He didn't write it down. He didn't have to. Austin Powers had arrived. Shagadelic, baby. Born in the glow of dashboard lights and the echo of a song from another decade. Number 3. That lonely drive wasn't just a random spark. It was a memory calling back from decades earlier. Mike Myers grew up in a house where Saturday nights meant James Bond marathons, Peter Sellers comedies, and the crackle of old vinyl spinning British pop hits from the 60s. His father, Eric, wasn't just a fan. He was a curator of cool. He'd point out the swagger of Sean Connery, the wit of Michael Caine, the absurd charm of the Beatles in A Hard Day's Night. To a young Mike, these weren't just movies. They were lessons in style, timing, and how to own a room without saying a word. Eric's love for that era became the blueprint, the tailored suits, the cheeky humor, the fearless confidence. When Myers lost his dad in 1991, those memories took on a new weight. So when he finally created Austin Powers, it wasn't just a parody character. It was a tribute, a way to wrap all those nights on the couch, all those shared laughs, into something loud, ridiculous, and deeply personal. Austin may have been a joke to the world, but to Mike Myers, he was family. Number 4. For all the heart Mike Myers poured into Austin Powers, there was one role he didn't plan to touch. Dr. Evil, the bald, cat-stroking $1 million supervillain, was supposed to belong to someone else entirely. Jim Carrey. Fresh off Ace Ventura, The Mask, and Dumb and Dumber, Carrey was Hollywood's untouchable comedy king. His rubber-faced chaos seemed perfect for a Bond spoof bad guy. Early drafts had Myers focusing solely on Austin, while Carrey brought Dr. Evil to life. The plan was in motion, until fate stepped in. Carrey's schedule for Liar Liar collided with Austin Powers, and the window closed. That's when Myers made the gamble, to play both the hero and the villain. It was twice the workload, twice the pressure, and it meant crafting two completely different rhythms, two completely different worlds, and then making them clash in the same frame. But the risk paid off. Without that twist of fate, Austin Powers might have been remembered as just another 90s comedy. With it, Myers turned the movie into a one-man duel, a hero and a nemesis forever locked in a battle of ridiculous ridiculous proportions. Number 5. In the late 90s, Pamela Anderson was one of the most famous women on the planet. Baywatch had made her an icon. Red swimsuit, California sunshine, the slow-motion run seen in 140 countries. So when casting began for Austin Powers' chic, razor-sharp partner, Vanessa Kensington, her name was high on the list. Studio execs saw the marketing potential immediately, pairing the world's most over-the-top spy with the world's most recognizable bombshell. But Anderson's career was at a crossroads. At the same time she was circling Austin Powers, she was also in the running for LA Confidential. That part went to Kim Basinger, who went on to win an Oscar. And in the shuffle, Elizabeth Hurley landed Vanessa. For Hurley, it was a career-defining pivot. The role transformed her from model-turned-actress into a 90s film star, draped in spy chic. She became the perfect foil to Mike Myers' absurdity, all elegance on the outside, all game for the lunacy inside. Pamela's version of Austin Powers will always remain a what if, the ultimate alternate universe casting. But in this one, Hurley took the role and made it swing. Number 6. On Saturday Night Live, there was one impression everyone in the writer's room admired and feared. Dana Carvey's take on SNL creator Lorne Michaels. The glacial pace, the calm, clipped Canadian drawl, the pinky to the lip, that mix of polite charm and total control. Carvey had honed it for years, a backstage in-joke that occasionally slipped into sketches. It wasn't just accurate, it was scalpel sharp. Then Austin Powers hit theaters, and there was Dr. Evil. The posture, the voice, the mannerisms. Carvey couldn't unsee it, and neither could his fellow SNL alumni. To them, it was Lorne, straight from Carvey's act. Rumor spread that Myers had lifted the impression wholesale without asking. The two comedians, once tight from Wayne's World, began to drift apart. What might have been a minor misunderstanding turned into a silent, years-long rift. The tension finally surfaced in public when Myers returned to SNL after The Spy Who Shagged Me. On live TV, he looked right at Michaels and said Dr. Evil wasn't based on him. Michaels just smiled, the kind of smile that reveals nothing, and maybe says everything. Number 7. Jay Roach didn't just direct Austin Powers, he reshaped it. When Myers handed over the first draft, Roach came back with 10 pages of notes, sharper jokes, tighter pacing, smarter parody. Instead of just shooting what was on the page, he built on it, scene by scene, until the film clicked. It helped that Roach was already tied to the Austin Powers universe. He was married to Susanna Hoffs, bassist for the Bangles and a bandmate in Mike Myers' 60s parody group Ming T. That connection gave him an inside track on the character, and the courage to push back when a gag could be better. Number 8. On paper, Austin Powers was already ridiculous, but on set, it was chaos. The kind of chaos you can't script. Director Jay Roach and Mike Myers made a pact early. If a scene felt alive, don't lock it down. Let it breathe. Let it get weird. And they did. To the point where nearly half the film wasn't on the page at all. Whole gags were born in the moment. A tossed-off glance from Dr. Evil, Austin pausing just a second too long before delivering a line. Actors were encouraged to push the absurdity, to go too far, to see if they could break each other without breaking character. It meant takes would run long, scenes would unravel into laughter, but it also gave the film that loose, unpredictable rhythm, where you genuinely couldn't tell what was planned and what was just Mike Myers following a comedic impulse. 30 to 40% improvised, which explains why so many lines feel like lightning in a bottle, because they were. Number 9. Austin Powers didn't just spoof James Bond, it inhaled decades of 007 and blew them back out in Technicolor. The henchman stroking a hairless cat, the slow swivel in a leather chair, the absurd layers with shark tanks and laser beams. If you were a Bond fan, it felt like every frame hit a little nod, sometimes 2 or 3 stacked in the same shot. Even the women were callbacks. Femme fatale with names that sound like dirty jokes. Deadpan assassins wielding weapons so impractical they might as well have been designed by Q on a sugar high. The joy was in the overload. Myers and Roach weren't just poking fun at Bond tropes. They were recreating them with obsessive detail, then cranking the absurdity to the point of collapse. It was parody, yes, but it was also a love letter, one where every shaken, not stirred wink made you feel like you were in on the joke. Number 10. Blink and you might miss her. Early in the film, Dr. Evil casually wipes out a lineup of his own assassins, a throwaway gag on paper, but one loaded with sly references. Among them, a woman named Rita. Not just any Rita, a full-on meter maid, complete with hat, badge, and that prim, uptight look straight out of the late 60s. For Beatles fans, it's instant recognition. Lovely Rita wasn't just another track on Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band. It was Paul McCartney's playful ode to a parking officer who, in his words, looked a little like a military figure. Myers knew exactly what he was doing. A spy parody this drenched in 60s nostalgia couldn't resist pulling in music royalty, And by dropping lovely Rita into Dr. Evil's kill list, he turned a 1-second background joke into a secret handshake for Beatles obsessives. Because in Austin Powers, even the assassins had groove. Number 11. Dr. Evil might have had the pinky and the plans, but the Sphinx Cat had the audience. His real name was Ted Nugent. Yes, really. And unlike most animal actors, Ted never flinched. Bright lights, booming lines, exploding set pieces, he stayed calm in every take. The hairless look wasn't a special effect. He was naturally that striking. And while villains usually get the last laugh, here it was a cat, perched in the world's most evil lap, silently owning every scene. Number 12. Those thick black frames weren't just a random quirk. Mike Myers was pulling straight from the pages of spy history, specifically the Ipcris file, where Michael Caine's Harry Palmer made brainy, bespectacled espionage look dangerously cool. Caine's Palmer wasn't Bond. He wasn't suave or tuxedoed. He was working class, sarcastic, and a little rough around the edges. Exactly the kind of anti-Bond energy Myers wanted Austin to embody, only with more crushed velvet and teeth you could spot from orbit. But here's the twist. Years later, when the franchise reached Goldmember, Michael Caine himself was cast as Austin's father. And when he walked on set, he was wearing the same iconic style of glasses that had inspired Austin in the first place. It wasn't just a cameo. It was a perfect 1960s loop closing in real time. The man who'd influenced the parody was now inside it, carrying the same look that started it all. Number 13. Austin Powers was built on nostalgia, and not just in the gags. Mike Myers and Jay Roach deliberately filled the cast with actors who had lived through and helped define the era they were parodying. Michael York, the Shakespeare-trained British star who once embodied suave heroes in Cabaret and Logan's Run, stepped into the role of Basil Exposition, turning the stiff mission briefing archetype into a running joke. Robert Wagner, forever remembered as the smooth, debonair face of 1960s television in It Takes a Thief, became number 2, Dr. Evil's slick right-hand man. For both men, it was a second spotlight. They weren't just playing parts, they were living touchstones, carrying the style, cadence, and charisma of the real swinging 60s straight into a 90s comedy. And when audiences saw them on screen, something clicked. The parody didn't just look authentic, it felt authentic. Because the 60s cool wasn't an act, it was standing right there. Number 14. Before Mindy Sterling's guttural war cry became one of the most quoted sounds in 90s comedy, the role of Dr. Evil's no-nonsense enforcer was headed in a wildly different direction. Producers first had their sights on Rhea Perlman, the sharp-tongued, pint-sized powerhouse who ruled Cheers as Carla Tortelli. If she'd taken the part, Frau Farbacina might have traded her icy, authoritarian glare for something far more scrappy, a wisecracking, barroom brawler energy wrapped in a lab coat. But fate and a scheduling conflict closed that door. Enter Mindy Sterling. She didn't just play Frau, she owned her. Sterling leaned into the Teutonic severity, hammering every syllable with comic precision, turning what could have been a throwaway henchwoman into a volcanic presence, a woman whose voice could practically rattle the camera lens. It was one of those rare recasts where losing the first choice didn't just work out. It gave the movie one of its most unforgettable performances. Number 15. Months before audiences ever sat down in a dark theater to meet Austin Powers, he had already invaded their living rooms. MTV aired a 1-hour primetime special, Austin Powers' Electric Pussycat Swingers Club, and it wasn't just a promo reel. It was a full-blown television event. Styled like a psychedelic cousin of Rowan and Martin's Laugh-In, the special was pure sensory overload. Flashing colors, groovy set pieces, a Fab Birds of the 90s countdown that felt like a pinball machine of pop culture. And the guest list? A wild mix. Juliana Margulies, Rosie O'Donnell, Robert Wagner, Michael York, all playing along in Austin's surreal, over-the-top world. Even the credits broke the rules. Instead of listing them as actors or cameos, they were billed as members of the Swingers Club, as if Austin had personally recruited them for his madcap spy mission. By the time the movie opened, Austin Powers wasn't just a character in a trailer. He was already a TV host, a pop culture agitator, and the grooviest man in the room, months before the box office ever got to meet him. Number 16. In the mid-90s, studios weren't exactly throwing money at a psychedelic spy spoof from the guy best known as Wayne Campbell. Mike Myers and Jay Roach scraped together just $16.5 million, pocket change compared to the summer blockbusters of the era. Sets were built lean, costumes were recycled, every creative choice had to stretch a dollar without looking cheap. But here's the twist. The movie didn't need an avalanche of money. It had something more powerful. A crystal clear vision and a cast who knew exactly how far to lean into it. The velvet suits, the swinging soundtrack, the groovy winking absurdity that felt like it had teleported straight out of 1967. When it finally hit theaters, that tiny budget turned into a giant roar. The film grossed over $67 million worldwide, quadrupling its cost, and didn't stop there. It became a VHS and DVD juggernaut, seeping into pop culture until Yeah Baby was echoing from college dorms to corporate boardrooms. From a shoestring gamble to a global comedy invasion, Austin Powers proved you don't need Bond money to make spy history. Number 17. Austin Powers didn't just make money, it rewired the comedy spy game. Before 1997, the spy spoof was mostly a dusty relic of the 60s. After Austin, studios smelled gold and charged in like it was a license to print groovy. Suddenly, theaters were flooded with big loud wink-at-the-camera parodies. Johnny English tried to bottle the same campy charm. The Spy Who Dumped Me swung for absurd action. Even cult gems like Undercover Brother leaned into the cool spy meets chaos formula. But here's the problem. They were chasing Austin's swagger without understanding its soul. Myers' creation wasn't just a parody, it was a love letter to the culture that inspired it. The copycats had the gadgets, the gags, even the shag, but no heartbeat. Audiences could feel it. One by one, the imitators fizzled, and with every flop, Austin's legacy grew. The only spy spoof of its era that truly had the mojo. Because you can copy the suit, you can copy the teeth, but you can't fake the swing. Number 18. Years later, Daniel Craig half-joked that Mike Myers destroyed the myth of James Bond. Once audiences had laughed at the shag carpet, the villain monologues, and the ridiculous gadgets, there was no going back to campy spy adventures. The Bond franchise had to reinvent itself, trading smirks for grit and martini jokes for bruised knuckles. In other words, Austin Powers didn't just spoof 007, he rewrote his future. Number 19. By Goldmember, audiences knew Nigel Powers had one irrational quirk: pure, burning hatred for the Dutch. No explanation, no history, just venom. That absurd bit came from Myers' real father, a proud Englishman who despised Hawaiians because they murdered Captain Cook in his sleep and wouldn't even allow a pineapple in the house. Myers figured if you're going to saddle a character with a bizarre grudge, it may as well be against the nicest people on Earth, for absolutely no reason. Number 20. On screen, Random Task was the silent assassin with the razor-edged bowler hat, a parody so absurd it made audiences laugh. Off-screen, the man behind him, Joe Sun, carried a darkness that would turn that laughter cold. Long before the movie, in 1990, Sun was part of a brutal home invasion and torture of a 19-year-old woman. He disappeared into obscurity for nearly 2 decades, his crimes buried under time and silence. But in 2008, a DNA match ripped the mask away. The victim's realization was chilling. She had owned Austin Powers on VHS for years, never knowing her attacker's face stared back at her from the screen. Convicted and sentenced to life in prison, Sun's violence didn't stop. In 2017, he was found guilty of murdering his cellmate, adding another 27 years to a sentence that could stretch to 275 years to life. It's a story more twisted than any spy plot, and one that leaves Austin Powers fans with a shiver no parody could ever deliver. Bonus fact: every spy has a signature. For Bond, it's the tuxedo and the Walther PPK. For Austin Powers, it's the Jaguar. That Union Jack-blasted Jaguar wasn't just a ride. It was a rolling love letter to every ridiculous thing about the 60s. And then there was the plate. 4 bold letters. Swinger. No codes. No clever riddles. Just pure, unapologetic Austin. The kind of detail you didn't have to pause to understand, but you did have to smile at. Because sometimes the loudest statement a spy can make is right there on the bumper. Austin Powers wasn't just a parody. It was a love letter, a fever dream, and a pop culture hand grenade, reshaping how we saw spies, comedy, and even Bond himself. From velvet suits to volcano layers, from Beatles nods to Bond takedowns. It proved one thing: cool is forever, baby. If this one still makes you laugh out loud, drop a comment. Tell us what swinging classic we should groove into next, because in a world full of Dr. Evils, sometimes the only answer is to stay groovy.